A lot of people ask why Tutnese feels so hidden, why it feels guarded, why it feels like there's this wall around it. And that's a fair question. But to understand the answer, you first have to understand what Tutnese actually is. Tutnese, often called Tut within the African American community, is not a fad or a passing linguistic trend. It's not code switching for fun. Tutnese is African American history, spoken. It was born during a time when African Americans were being systematically exploited and stripped of their humanity. Denied the right to read or write English, forbidden from freely speaking their ancestral languages, and even restricted from speaking openly to one another, all under the constant threat of punishment. So our people adapted. Tutnese emerged as a means of survival, a way to educate one another, a way to communicate safely, a way to protect information, and a way to stay connected when everything else was being taken. But it's important to understand this clearly. Tutnese did not remain frozen in that moment. What began as a coded practice, used for protection and survival, was carried forward by elders, families, and communities. Over time, through use, repetition, creativity, and care, it developed into something more. Tutnese transitioned from code into language, an organic language, a language shaped by daily life, by sound, by rhythm, by meaning. A language that adapted as African Americans lived, grew, and were raised here in the United States. A language that continued to evolve as generations were born into it, not as outsiders learning a system, but as inheritors living inside it. And that distinction matters, because Tutnese is not mine. It is not owned by heritage dialects, and it does not belong to any single individual or institution. Tutnese is the birthright of African Americans whose ancestors were enslaved in North America and whose descendants lived, survived, and cultivated language here. It belongs to those who carried it, practiced it, expanded it, and allowed it to grow. Today, Tutnese is no longer only reacting to oppression. It generates meaning from within itself. New words emerge, new meanings form, usage shapes structure, culture shapes sound. That is the mark of a living language. Because trauma doesn't just disappear. It teaches you to guard. It teaches you to be careful. It teaches you to hold tight to what little you have left. So yes, gatekeeping exists in the Tutnese-speaking community. Not because people are selfish, not because they want power, but because Tutnese isn't just language, it's legacy. For many, there's a deep fear of Tutnese being misunderstood, exploited, mocked, or watered down into something unrecognizable. And history gives us every reason to be cautious. But here's the part we don't talk about enough. Gatekeeping can protect, but it can also freeze. If Tutnese is only whispered, if it's only hidden, if it's only locked away, then eventually it stops living. Languages don't survive by being protected in silence. They survive by being spoken, correctly, intentionally, and with care. And that's where the difference between gatekeeping and stewardship comes in. At Heritage Dialects, we don't believe we own Tutnese. We believe we carry it on behalf of a people it already belongs to. Stewardship doesn't say, "This is mine." Stewardship says, "This is precious, and I'm responsible for how it's passed forward." And part of that responsibility, especially today, means ensuring Tutnese is taught and shared in ways that meet the realities of the present. A living language must be operable in its time. That means Tutnese deserves to be presented using modern learning standards, accessible tools, and formats that resonate with today's African American generation, just as other world languages are. Not as novelty, not as folklore, but as a language worthy of the same care, structure, and instructional quality found across contemporary language learning spaces. Modern presentation is not dilution, it's continuation. If Tutnese is to live, it must live where the people are, in today's classrooms, platforms, technologies, and modes of learning, without losing its grounding or its soul. Our mission is not to popularize Tutnese. It's not to make it trendy. It's not to turn it into performance. Our mission is to protect its integrity while ensuring its survival. That means teaching Tutnese as what it actually is, a real living language with structure, history, and an ongoing internal logic. It means centering African American history in every lesson. It means rejecting caricature and misuse. It means making sure context always comes before access. We don't believe in open access without understanding. But we also reject fear-based silence, because preservation without transmission is just another form of loss. And growth without stewardship, That's how culture gets stolen. So when we teach Tutnese, we do it with care, with grounding, with accountability, not to lock people out, but to make sure what's passed forward is still whole. When you learn Tutnese the right way, you're not just learning words, you're reclaiming history. You're reconnecting with ancestors who resisted and survived. You're participating in a living linguistic tradition that is still growing. So the real question isn't whether Tutnese should be protected. The question is how. Do we guard it so tightly that it fades away? Or do we steward it so carefully that it lives on, strong, intact, evolving, and accessible to the people it belongs to? That's the line we walk at Heritage Dialects. Not gatekeepers, stewards. And that difference matters.